So my name is Nick Cobbing. I'm a photographer, photojournalist, and this work right here is where I started really. So documenting organizations like Exodus was the how I cut my teeth as a photojournalist. Now I work for magazines like I did a story for National Geographic. So a lot of my work is kind of more concerned with the environment, about nature and the environment. So there were a lot of people who were organizing parties at that time, and they would go to the party, listen to the music, stay up all night, and go home. I think with Exodus, it was a lot more than that. You know, they had other things behind the music that they really wanted to do. Working locally, it was a very local scene. I was curious. I think I read an article in the newspaper, in The Guardian. I think it was by Duncan Campbell, called Rave New World, and it was kind of really did the rounds at the time. A lot of people were talking about it. And he wrote about certain things that had been happening to the Exodus Collective in Luton. He wrote about certain things that were happening to Exodus in Luton in the newspaper. And I was super curious. I was a young photographer looking for stories, if you like. You know, I wanted interesting stories to photograph that spoke to my interests as a young man. I was interested in free parties and squatting and music. So I thought, I've got to go and check these guys out. You know, I've got to go and have a look at this. And I think I drove up there, arranged to meet Glenn. I called up Glenn and arranged to meet him. And Glenn Jenkins took me on a whistle-stop tour of, you know, all the sites that were pertained to the Exodus struggle, to their history. So that's that first photograph I showed you with him standing outside the Oakmore Hotel, bending my ear, telling me the whole story about how they were evicted and the police pressure on them and their struggle, yeah. I listened to every word. I took it very seriously because I was a young reporter. I was like, yeah, really? And what happened next? And I came back with my head full of, you know, stories and my ears burning. And I got to photograph these guys. I want to go to a party. So I said to Glenn, when's your next party? And he said, oh, we might have one in a few weeks. You know, stay tuned, phone up this phone line, come along, come in your vehicle, get in the queue, the convoy, as it was called, and follow this convoy, the Pied Piper, from an industrial estate, and you're going to end up at a party, and it will blow your mind. There'll be lots to photograph, Nick, he said. So I did. And that's where these pictures came from. So this is a photograph taken in a sand quarry, disused sand quarry. And Exodus have occupied it for the night to have a party. And you can see the boxes here. So that's their stack of speakers, which is actually huge, but it's dwarfed by the location. And this is the early hours of the morning, and I'm walking around the quarry taking photographs of these guys, of the people. I mean, everyone's still dancing, right? It's the morning and everyone's still dancing. So these people have mostly been dancing all night. People having fun, listening to music in the outdoors. And they haven't paid some promoter, you know, half a month's wages to go there, right? This for them, it was pretty much free. They could afford it. They could afford to go there. Made them happy. What's not to like about that? This photograph is of two of the members of Exodus who were kind of quite doing a lot of the Exodus outreach, spokespeople, you could say. So it's Glenn Jenkins and Biggs on the right. And I think I can't remember where I was when I took this photograph. It might have been the farm, or and the police had come up to have a word with them about the parties, or maybe about the farm, and I just like the hands in this photograph. So like Glenn is pointing downwards with his finger. He's making a point, and Biggs has got his hands on his chest, and it's got this me, you know. So it's like a defensive hand movements, but also very. Glenn really wants to make a point here, and then the policeman's also got his hand out with his fingers wrapped back like that. So it's a little battle of hand movements, which I really like. And this one is indoors at a party, and it's two people holding a flag, and it's got the fist with the barbed wire through it, and it would have been in the Rasta colors, indoors at a rave. So it's a photograph that shows it to be more than a party, I think, more than just a rave. Because at the time, there would have been parties up and down the UK, right? All over, especially, within a stone's throw of London. There would have been free parties and raves everywhere. But I think with an Exodus do, they used to call them, with an Exodus do, there was a bit more going on. There was a kind of real context to it. They were behind something. They really had something to say. It wasn't just, all right, party and then go home and go to work on Monday morning. And I think you can kind of see that in their faces. A lot of these people know each other. They grew up together. They lived and worked together. Some of them are from the same blocks, the same estate. So I think Exodus was really rooted in a locality. It had a place that it was coming from. So in this photograph, I've homed in on two dancers, and it's two guys dancing with each other, which is kind of cool. You see it a bit, but I don't know. Sometimes guys, I don't want to dance near another guy. I want to go and dance with girls, with women. It's kind of cool that they're both completely unself-conscious, and they've got this movement. They're kind of spinning with the music, and they're like this, and they're working with each other with the dance. They're making no, they're not making boxes. That's a bit, but they're dancing in their own way to this music together, and acknowledging each other, looking at each other, and it's happy. I'm looking at all the faces of people. They're drenched with sweat. They've been dancing all night. I think the daylight's starting to come in through the windows in the roof. It's like a dawn dancing all night photo. To make this photograph, I had to jump up and stand on some of these boxes. So by that point, I was obviously being accepted into the community, because I think anybody who tried to jump up and stand on the boxes would have been like, oi, you, off. Because the boxes were revered. These speakers that they had had a kind of certain reverence in the community. I think this person had a really good night. And they're kind of a bit out of it, but they're not so out of it that they've dropped their joint on the floor. He's still got and his glasses. He's got his sunglasses in his other hand. And these are the last stalwarts of the dance. These are the last people dancing. We're still going. We're not going to stop until you take the boxes away, until you actually unplug it. Then we'll stop dancing. I mean, there's rubbish on the floor, but in later photographs in my coverage, you see them clear all this rubbish up. So they used to pick up all their trash and bag it. And the places were left pretty much as they found them. So these are the boxes, these are the cabinets containing the speakers. And these are stacked up in a big tower at one end of the party. And it kind of shows a little bit this kind of reverence that the members of Exodus or the organizers of Exodus had towards the source of their music, the boxes. That's what gave the dance its power, and that's what they congregated around. You know, it's kind. I don't want to be religious, but it has a not religious, it's spiritual. It has a spiritual center. So you could look at the party, and the party would be revolved around the boxes in the corner. Everyone would be facing probably not so much to the decks, but towards the speaker boxes. When these are stacked up and you stand next to it, it's like your guts are moving around in your body with the bass. Can you imagine the size of these? Like the speaker you have in your front room is probably like, 7-8 inches, but these are like, they're as tall as my kids, they're massive. And you pile all these up in the corner of the room and it's like boom, and the bass just goes right through you. So it is really an experience. So this is a photograph, it's a portrait of Guy. He was a very illustrious member of Exodus, one of the sort of, founders. The people would be really forefront in Exodus when you met them, one of the spokespeople. And he's actually come down to London to a benefit. I think they were doing a benefit for one of the groups around. It was around the time of the Criminal Justice Bill, which later became an act that threatened to criminalise free parties in Britain in the mid-90s. In some other photographs I have, you can see he has the lyrics from the Bob Marley song Exodus tattooed on his back. Exodus movement of Jah people. Are you satisfied with the life you're living? I think they were really trying to live out the lyrics of that song. It meant a great deal. Well, it's going to mean a lot to you, right, if you have the whole entire lyrics tattooed right across your back. That song is speaking to you. Because they were shot on black and white film. They were made on this stuff. So that's like one roll, as it were. Now I just shoot thousands and thousands of pictures digitally, and I never really think about having to ration myself but there's one roll of film, 36 exposures. And I think I would go out for a day's shooting with maybe 12, 15 rolls. At the time, I was covering lots of the issues in the mid-90s that had become kind of galvanized or united by the Criminal Justice Bill, which later became the Act of 94, 95. And it kind of put a lot of these people in the same basket. And I think the people who were putting forward, mainly on the right, mainly in the Conservative Party, hadn't really thought about it. But of course what it did, it made the people affected look round at each other and find allies. Oh, I'm a squatter, but they're also coming for the Free Party people. So maybe we should talk. And then the Free Party people saw, oh, they're also coming for travellers, New Age travellers and Gypsy travellers. Maybe we should talk to them. So all these groups started to organise around that bill. So it actually had the opposite effect. It actually made a lot of self-interest groups come together and organise and realise that they had a lot in common, and they were being targeted by the politics of the time, politicians of the time. They were all being targeted for the same reasons. It was a kind of lifestyle issue. People did not like their lifestyle. They didn't like what they were saying or what they were doing. So there was quite a movement that came out of the Criminal Justice Bill of 94, 95. I photographed in a lot of those communities and chronicled a lot of those movements. And what drew me to that kind of subject matter, I was in it. It concerned me. So I lived in I lived in squats when I was younger. There's a concept in photojournalism or in any kind of journalism or storytelling, and that's dig where you stand. Sometimes the best storytelling you can do, if that's what you want to do, if you want to write or you want to photograph or make a film, dig where you stand. Start with what you know. You know, flying halfway across the world to report on something in another continent isn't necessarily going to be the most authentic story you can make. But if you turn around to what's around you and you try to find stories that you've lived and experienced, stories that are happening to people around you, well, that could be really interesting. And I think that's what I did at the time. I had lived in squats, I had been to free parties. I was really interested in free festivals. And then suddenly there was a shift in society and things were happening to those communities at a political level. And I wanted to go and get stuck in there and make stories about that. So yeah, it affected me and my people, you might say. We had an old van. We had this old Maestro van. I think it was like an ex-Telecom, British Telecom van. And we used to drive up to Luton in the evening to join the gathering to find out where the party was. And our daughter was quite young at the time. She would have been a toddler or even younger. So, you know, rather than leave her with a babysitter in town, she would sleep in the van. My daughter would sleep in the van, and we would take turns. So we'd take turns to party. So I would go out and join the rave and take photos for an hour, go back, fall asleep next to my daughter, and then her mum would go out and party. So we used to kind of tag team the family, the family sleeping around the party.